I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Or like a motion to approve the agenda for December 11th, 2023 as presented.
Second.
Ponder. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Ayes have it. Up next, we're going to have a working session around finance and purchasing, and we'll turn it over to Ms. Embry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this special time you're giving this evening. Oh, thank you for that. So thank you very much. So this evening, we have provided for you an excerpt that represents the October 26, 2023 Board of Education presentation for the financial report. Also, within that report was a specific purchasing recommendation. I'll remind you that there were 3 primary recommendations included: that an annual approval of preferred vendors with estimated annual amounts be allowed as our standard process, that we increase the threshold from $7,500 to $25,000 for individual memorandums, and provide reports listing all other approval requests, including vendor, purpose, and amount. And the third being authorize employment of a purchasing manager to increase compliance, competitiveness, and cost savings. We have also provided for you this evening the actual, the actual board regulation number 3165 for purchasing. And within that regulation, the 7,500 is specifically referenced regarding approval. You'll remember that further down the recommendation pages, I have provided you a grid that shows the number of individual memorandums from the FY23 year that were between $7,500 to $25,000. That accounted for 181 of the 332 memorandums that year, which represented 54.52% of the total, and the total dollar amount was $2,360,995.71 against the total grand total of $20,872,738. Is that sufficient memory building for the recommendation?
I know last time we talked about it, kind of throw out there for the board as well. I know there's some thoughts and concerns around the threshold from 75 to 25, but also more specifically around particular line items or budgetary items that maybe we want to keep the threshold the same or make some modifications between those thresholds. So throw that out there as a memory jogger for the board as well.
Clarity needed regarding the recommendation?
I think in general, I don't have a concern with that recommendation to go to 25,000 for individual memorandums. My initial concern was kind of by department. Really the curricular things, academic department type things, always got a little more scrutiny from me, others, but so those were the things where I thought I was reluctant to go from 7,500 to 25,000 on this, because a lot of them were in that 13 to, I guess you gave us a listing of what all of those were. But, in the past few months, we've talked also about improving a lot of those online resources, subscriptions that we pay for, potentially. Sure.
Jane said she's had 4 minutes. Try to be more set. There's a.
Might just need to tilt that, Ken, because it So,
Jane, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay.
I can now.
All right.
Maybe just wave anytime you can, so we'll try to remind people.
So with the curricular things, if we were to approve a majority of those either by line in the budget, if we earmarked a certain amount of money for each online subscription by line in the budget, I think that would, I don't know about how others feel, but I feel like that would be approving the resource at that point, or we can do some sort of another agenda item during the year, or we can keep doing individual memos, but my preference would be to do it once per year, approve a dollar amount for each one with some sort of a contingency for annual price fluctuations.
And for clarity, are you referencing as we are making the budget recommendation for the upcoming fiscal year, or at any point in time? It wouldn't matter.
Well, the first year is always the hardest because when do you start it?
Right.
I guess I would leave that up to you in the academic department, how quickly you could.
So we could
Streamline all of
potentially
that.
put a placeholder budget amount, and then team members could further determine the best resources, and then make those as one comprehensive recommendation.
That's one way.
Later in the year, or.
And that, again, that's just my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it. I don't want to drive that recommendation, just myself, but I think that would cover a lot of the curricular things, where I feel like we could make this 25,000 blanket without breaking it out. It's my understanding, as always, if we have questions, we can always ask as board members. So instead of, I know my first year I had a lot of questions about what everything was, but now as I'm here my second year, I'm starting to prove the same things. Next year I already know what it is, so there'll always be that initial question for new board members. But, so for me, I feel like I can still ask questions if there is something that I don't know about during that week of the meeting. So just some ideas there to do the online, or the, I guess we can call them online subscriptions.
And I'd like to say that I agree with Director Cook about, these are my words, maybe more oversight of curricular items. I understand that there's going to be a difficulty in getting everything synced at the same time. However, I still think that oversight needs to be done, and I think that I'm not in favor of curricular items up to $25,000, especially at this point in time. Just my opinion.
About recently, we also did basically a purchase order amount for a mechanical contractor, if I recall. Is that something that you foresee us doing more of for routine emergency?
Actually, that would be the preferred path, and I highlighted it, actually, that's the reference in number 1, the annual approval of preferred vendors with estimated annual amounts. We do that currently with transportation fuel. There are just pockets where that's one example where that does take place. And it would be no different for electricity, that kind of thing. We could put a purchase order within the system, and that will be brought to you basically just to have you be aware of it beyond the budgeted allocation. But that would definitely help expedite the work as well. There will still be those scenarios though where we didn't have an advanced purchase order, and we have a need that would be addressing something within a building for repairs or other services.
Bill, I have a question. Do we have any idea for the total number of approvals? I'm going back to the curriculum that was down to 7,700. Do you have any idea of how many items that may mean in
Right. So when we look at the data that's in the system, I did segregate out by department. So I'm not sure if we're referencing academics or professional development. There's also alternative learning where there could be those items. Though the curricular items are actually beneath that, but we could completely limit it down to curricular. If I take a glance at academics, there were 42 memos that fell within that 181. For professional development, there were 2. For alternative learning, there were 24. So that provides you context. The others within the facilities, it could be bond-related, technology-related, furniture, fixture, and equipment, that type of thing. It would still significantly reduce the number of memorandums that are being prepared.
Harold, to clarify, would everything then under up to $24,999 be within one AP report, or there'd be a separate report now for $7,500 to $25,000?
I would suggest that we likely have multiple breaks on that for ease in review by board members with regard to the listings that would get posted, much like we have against table listings currently.
So then the idea would be to have multiple reports, we can review those, and if there's something that we want to ask more questions, we can pull that out.
Absolutely.
For additional discussion and questions.
But just to clarify, so my understanding is the AP report, those are things we've already purchased the month prior,
Correct.
whereas this 7,500 and 24,999 list would be things that
We have not.
we have not, right, okay. So we're approving the purchase, we're not, basically just not preparing a memo, it's going to be in a
Right.
tabular format.
Now, if I understood you correctly, I'm going to cut you off. But currently, the 7,500 and greater, we have not purchased.
Right.
Right, okay.
Just a few items maybe that aren't specifically called out here, that I just wonder if it makes sense to kind of make an addendum or addition for those is when we approve multi-year contracts, they continually come back to us with new memos and stuff. Hey, this is what, does that make sense? Is that, have you seen that? In my mind, it doesn't necessarily make sense if it's already been approved and we've already signed a multi-year contract. Why are we reapproving it?
And actually, I've had that conversation with a few of our directors, and one is in the room currently, Dr. Wilson, where there can be some of those multi-year agreements. And my recommendation to the team is that we be very conscientious when we're typing in whatever the description is on the payment. It could reference DOE approved and the date that it had been approved, so that there's instant clarity and we can easily reference back to that approval date. So that would be part of the communication and education for people that are entering that information.
And then the other item I think about going through this is just budgeted items in general. When we do the annual budget of anything in the budget, whether it's over, even if it's over $2,500, why is it necessarily coming back to the board? If we've already approved the budget and looked at the budget and said, yeah, it sounds good. Is there a reason for us to then reapprove it again later on in the year when we actually spend the money, or is it? To me, it feels reasonable to let Dr. Rumpus, yourself, CFO, the superintendent, kind of say, yep, this is what's in the budget. It's the same thing. It hasn't, cost hasn't changed. Let's just keep moving forward with what's already been pre-approved rather than having to be bogged down with additional approvals.
And in that situation, are you referencing where there would be one vendor for that budget line?
Yeah, so like specific items, so not like a placeholder.
Right.
So like we have a specific line where we are going to spend money for this, and we've already got quotes, and here's what it's going to be, and we plan to do it next year. And then we come back and we have to approve it again.
I think so many budget allocations, there can be multiple vendors, or the bid process hasn't been led, or whatever the circumstance may be, and so that's partly why that comes back to you for that specific approval. But I understand what you're referencing, if it is a one item scenario or project that our approval has been
There may be some state statute reasons why we're we're approving those multi-year every year, maybe it's something to check on. But to Adam's point, realize every single purchase we make can't be lined out in the budget. Budget time's busy enough as it is. But certainly those multi-year contracts, if there's a statute issue, I wonder if those we know who the vendor we're going to pay to in year 2 and 3 are, and we can probably line that out in the budget just as well. If there's a need for us to approve in year 2.
And likely, we could, as part of the budget recommendations, just prepare a listing of previously approved and included in the budget, so that it's captured.
I think we'll need some clarity around the language we've used, because I heard Vice President Cook saying, when you were speaking about curriculum, about software purchases, and then I heard Treasurer Pushkar say curriculum in general. And so are we talking, textbook resources, technology resources, the ACT books, even within the academic or curriculum umbrella, there's a lot of different purchases that fall in there.
But I was referring to the subscription-based things, which are mostly online. I feel like most textbook purchases would probably be over $25,000 most of the time. There again, we can always ask if there's a question. I don't know. Jane, what did you think?
I was referring to anything to do with which I don't believe we actually funded.
So I'm interpreting that as any resource that's going to be attached to what we're teaching in a classroom, not necessarily an assessment tool or special education resources that we might be using in a special education classroom, but regular education, a textbook, a supplemental resource, an online, those types of things. Is that
I
the
would
bucket that
agree
you're
with you,
talking
Connie,
about?
that,
And I think for the most part, we understand we're talking about it. There might be an oops or an ouch here or there that we forget something, but for the most part.
Yeah.
Dr. Cook, I actually had the same thought about the statutes, and maybe there was a mandate for that. I looked everywhere I thought I could look. And
There is nothing, but
I couldn't find anything.
I think it's more just seeking clarity or just out of the abundance of caution, way to make sure that the current board has awareness for that. But we can accomplish that through that accounts payable listing as well.
Other comments, discussion board? Any comments, discussion, thoughts around having a purchasing manager that's listed?
I have a question, how you, going back to this curriculum thing, if you're changing it to 25,000, yet tying something to curriculum, how's that going to be worded?
You could simply say that the threshold is 25,000, except for items related to curriculum, classroom resources will maintain a $7,500 threshold. Would that be the front you're thinking?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do whatever recommendation you have there. Yeah. About that. Jane, you don't already have language to that effect, do you?
So, did you ask?
You don't already have language to that 7,500 for curricular only, do you? Have you read
I
anything?
do not.
Okay.
No, I do not.
Additional discussion board? Back to the comment, question of purchasing manager? Put that on there as well, if there's any thoughts or commentary on
I do have some commentary on that, but I guess before we got into that one, Connie, or is that all that, our discussion, any questions? Or
I'm assuming professional development, that would not be in your bucket of resources. I think that was the only one that we didn't specifically address. I'm assuming no, but. Okay. I mean, honestly, most of it would be fairly costly, so I think it would come in naturally, but.
So if we looked at, on page 2, item 4, under general rules, would this be reasonable, that no purchase that may exceed $25,000, 25,000 or greater, I would say, except for classroom curricular resources. I'm sorry, I thought I had it worked out there. Would that be the right phrasing, except for classroom curricular resources, will be made without prior board approval unless in accordance with the emergency provisions or as otherwise indicated in this regulation? Or we could simply just tack that sentence at the end. Classroom curricular resources shall not exceed 7,500 or greater. In that space, somewhere in that space, okay. Of course, the 7,500 appears throughout, so we can change. I can craft it or work with you.
I don't have my policy hat on right now, but further throughout this regulation, then it does speak to under construction in other areas, bids and 5,000 threshold, 15,000 threshold. Is there anything we need to say from a consistency standpoint to not cause confusion for others that read this, that we're not, doesn't mean you can now go do work for 12,000 without appropriate approval. Those other
Right.
requirements would still be in place.
Can I ask a clarifying question? The listing, Carol, of the 7,500 to 25,000, that still needs prior approval from the board before purchase?
It would still receive approval, well, unless the board directs otherwise, but it would be part of a listing that's posted. So we'd be
But
held.
then wouldn't it be purchased in advance until the board approved?
Advanced, but it would be a listing rather than the memorandums. Well, and I say that except for, I think I need to revisit that. That's a great.
Well, the only reason I got confused was because number 4 said without prior, if that number 4 makes it, I assume that I can purchase it
Yeah.
before the board approves it, whereas if we just change number 4, I feel like you could purchase it in
Yeah.
advance. Yes,
You
so,
are correct. Thank
Okay.
you for that. Because the whole point of this, as we know, since I've joined the team, I'm sending an email to the board every time we've had an HVAC failure, which has been very frequent. And so the point for that in particular would be that it's written so that they can move on with the work without requiring the notification, having it be ratified later. But I think probably really we will improve this regulation would be the right thing, given the statutes.
Just using that HVAC example with emergency repairs, it's my understanding that wouldn't be affected by what we're doing here tonight. The 7,500 to 25,000 would still be a prior approval list.
So
Just, basically, we're talking about just getting rid of the memos, is my understanding.
that was a primary piece of it. But I would suggest we consider some other language then that would allow for maintenance type repairs to take place.
I'm open to that, by all means.
Would that include approval of an open PO though for up to?
And we would do that where we could, so we would have that blanket approval, but there could be certain one-off vendors where we didn't have the advance approval, and that would be the only vendor who could provide that service potentially.
Yeah, it's my understanding with some of our systems, they have to be sole source. There's only, nature of these companies. They have one local vendor. That's who you have to hire, but, I guess we have the emergency approval provision in place, or just for this reason, so I guess the question would be is, you're thinking a change to that is needed? Or maybe less?
Change something within that language that authorizes us to move forward with ratification of grant.
envisioning, maybe a hypothetical would help, but I mean, if something breaks, nothing's gonna break at Francistown North next year. Francistown Central, and it's $30,000 to repair. The board meeting was yesterday.
Right.
Well, ideally, what would happen in that
So
best case scenario?
currently, when I send memos, it's everything that's 7,500 or greater. And I was accustomed, in my previous district, the board policy said the emergency notification would occur if it's 25,000 or greater. It actually was. You'll also remember that the individual memorandum situation was 500,000. I should have been when we first discussed this. But, so yeah, that threshold is actually 25,000 for emergency notification. But a lot of what is done falls under the 25,000, but it is absolutely in that 7,500 to 10,000 or 15,000 threshold.
In that case, you'd want to change it to where emergency approval wouldn't be needed for anything 25,000. I would be okay with that. Jane, anything?
What safeguards do we have that, let's say, hypothetically, or refrigerator broke down for whatever reason, let's say it would be cheaper to buy a new one than it would be to repair it. Do we have safeguards in place that would help us to say that it's the lesser expensive option?
I would say to you that our administrators do that on a routine basis. They are consistently performing a cost-benefit analysis to determine the best path.
Okay. Just to know that safeguard is in there, sure. Certainly, just because we approved it, that we approved the cost, that, we look at it in case it was required to come
Yeah, it's probably worth pointing out, the board isn't the only one to approve these things.
Right.
I presume, well, not presumably, it goes through several levels of approval before it, or makes it, there's several sets of eyes on things.
So to clarify this in my mind, the whole point of this is to skip coming to us for approval for anything 25 grand and less.
It's not to skip it. Excuse me. We produce
All right, sorry,
all the memos.
I'm not always going to speak PC correct language.
Yep.
So you're not skipping, but
Like,
no purchase that may exceed $7,500 will be made without prior board approval. All we're looking to change is change that $7,500 to $25,000 unless it relates to curriculum that may exceed $7,500. Correct?
Correct.
So why could somebody in that case, why could somebody in the school district not go ahead and order something that's $22,000 without our approval? I guess I'm confused as to what that conversation was about.
So when Lisa pointed that out, we have multiple scenarios playing out here. So we would provide a listing of, let's say that nothing goes to the board, but what I'm talking about right now, we have accounts payable.
You're not skipping us, right?
I'm not skipping you. That's right. So we have the accounts payable listing where oftentimes the board is ratifying that which has already occurred. And that could be the utilization of electricity, where we didn't do a purchase order in advance. We didn't provide any type of PO listing. We didn't provide any memorandum seeking approval for that electricity. It just shows up as an accounts payable item. So the accounts payable listing has consistently been provided to the board. Then there would be, again, to Lisa's point, we would still have listings that would be less than 25,000. And those would be provided and posted for the board to review prior to moving forward with those. If it's 75,000, or excuse me, 7,500 to less than 25,000, it would be posted as a listing as opposed to a memorandum.
Okay, so phrasing, so making sure I'm understanding this. In that case, it would just be information. It's not for us to approve.
You would be approving it because technically, that would be our practice to provide you with the 7,500. So that's where we were discussing that we need to tweak the language a little differently in the board policy.
I guess I would ask then, what's the point of making this
We
change?
spend a lot of time on those memorandums.
But then we're still approving anything less than 25,000.
You are. We bring everything to the board ultimately
Well,
for
then-
your ratification.
Then all we're doing is messing with semantics here. We're not changing procedure at all.
Yeah, I understand his question. I think the point he's making is, in the end, we don't need to adjust the regulation. We would just need to change our practice. We don't have a memo.
Well,
Unless the intention is that we would move ahead with those purchases up to 25,000, it would be approved as an accounts payable report.
and that was my thinking at one point, and then I understand more clearly now that that's not our common thinking of it. So from my perspective, it's twofold, and that's where I reference such as the HVAC repairs, that type of thing.
Mhm.
That instead of a manager contacting the director and the director contacting me and me authorizing it in advance, anything 7,500 or greater, okay? In this situation, they would have that, they would know this is going to be okay to move forward if we modify that to be 25,000 on the emergency approval piece, to where we are all systems go, it's an emergency. It's going to show up as a ratification item for you. If it's less than 25,000, it would be on the listing. If it's more than 25,000 or greater, it would be a memorandum. And it would say that this was authorized under emergency approval. And we currently do that now. We provide you with memorandums for something that was 7,500 or greater. And you also get an email.
But I guess in my mind, I'm not sure you really, in my mind, it's almost like, to me, if I was in-house, it seems like you're trying to clarify, but yet you might be getting confusion.
Well,
So
again,
in my mind, if we're changing this, then I would say we change it, and then you guys adjust in-house procedures to just move forward with, you don't need our approval.
in a perfect world, we would not need to get anything approved that was less than 25,000 in advance. That would be a perfect world, yes.
So maybe that's the first question, does the board have any appetite? Was that your understanding?
And that's what Adam said. Right?
That was my understanding, that we were going with 25, we didn't need approval to purchase anything less that did not exceed 25,000. That was my understanding. If I don't understand why we're going through this process, this whole operation, if that's not what we're doing.
If you don't lift that threshold to
Yeah.
under 25,000.
Right.
You're not confused.
I did, yeah, he is. It just seems like we're spinning our wheels and we're really not, maybe it takes 2 steps out of your thing, but I could, it just seems like you create more potential for creating confusion in-house.
A lot of purchases between 7,500 and 25.
It's a big business.
I get it, and that's why I'm saying you either do it or we don't.
Yeah, I guess it was my understanding that the recommendation was to ease up on the time spent preparing memos, but the prior board approval would still be received for 70. Prior board approval for 7,500 to 20. Basically, still prior board approval, everything above 7,500, with just memos required at 25,000. Maybe is a better way to explain it. And I don't know that memos is anywhere in this policy. Maybe a policy change isn't even needed, but maybe it says memos. The emergency certainly would need to be a change, I think. Policy change, if we were to increase that, but yeah, I would have to probably go back, Carol, and look at that listing.
Okay.
go prior approval for 25,000.
But we also have the ability to review the listing and pull anything out that we,
But
That's-
to his point, at that juncture, now it's too late. Because if it's
Already-
less
already
than
been
25,000, we've issued a purchase order, we've purchased, we've moved on. And the listing, anything that would be in the listing form at that point would be ratification, either through accounts payable or purchase orders or however that would work.
I don't always like to compare us to surrounding districts. I don't hardly ever like it, but do we know what others do? Are we unreasonable with this 7,500?
I did look at that at one point, and I would be remiss if I attempted to speak with clarity to that, but there was a variety. I gave you my context from my previous district that was very much different, but, yeah. And definitely, though, the 25,000 number is a common number in other board policies relative to having authority up to 25,000.
Yeah, I think, Ron, if we give, it's the right PC term either, but if we give up everything between 7,500 and 25,000, that's a lot of oversight that and really, in some respects, the transparency, I don't know. I guess it's still there that we purchased it, but it's let's face it, it's in a list that's 60 pages long, 10-point font line items, if it's even 10 point. It's buried. So, is this the list?
That's the list. I'm asking you, Sean.
But I thought, maybe clarify, but I thought Jane's point, and then one of your concerns was you're okay with, definitely misunderstood, you're okay with up to 25,000 unless it related to curriculum.
Yeah, I won't speak for Jane. I guess what I was referring to is not seeing a memo for everything up to 25,000. We would still be approving prior to purchase. Basically, there was still a chance for the board to say, no, this isn't the right direction. We don't want to buy this product. Or, I don't know if that happens much. Maybe once or twice in the past year, if I had to guess. I'd have to think hard about it.
Or is there a number in between? I don't know if there's an appetite that, I think about inflation in general. I don't know when the $7,500 threshold was set to how many things prior would have cost $7,000 that are now $9,000 or $12,000. So to raise it to 10 or 15 for the just move ahead and purchase. And then we also then have an internal process change around the specific memos up to a certain threshold as well. If the idea really is to alleviate some of the workload or efficiency from an organizational operations standpoint.
Yeah, it would make sense to me because, Adam, you'd probably be better at these numbers than me, but it seems to me looking at the data that you provided here, we're spending over half of our time on 10% of the memorandum.
That is correct.
I'm not sure how you break that down any clearer, but it seems like we're. Leave my slide there.
I agree with Ron. Do you know how many, Carol, do you know how many of these 181 expenses either fall into the curriculum category or emergency category?
So those were the numbers, and I passed my document over to Randy now, but Jane had asked that. That was what I was referencing, that there are different departments under which that may occur. So I think these are higher than what those numbers would actually be. There were like 42 and 24 represented, I don't know, was it close to 80? I'm sorry? Thank you. 42, 24, and 2.
2 were professional development.
Two professional development, 24 or 24.
So, but 42 under academics, which would be the area within which curriculum would likely appear, curriculum-related resources. So even that 42 is high, I would imagine.
And how many under emergency services, you know? HVAC, sorry. I saw a lot.
Well, I've sent a number of emails this year, and that's since August, so I haven't tracked them.
I would have guessed maybe a dozen.
Yeah. The worst part of that is when you have a situation you need to deal with it, it's all the steps that it takes, even internally, to affect the work that needs to happen.
Time is of the essence.
Right.
Any other thoughts or discussion around thresholds board?
I guess my question is if we were to go to 25,000 without prior approval, and I don't know, I'm just going to use this as a hypothetical. Our subscription to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch is in here for, I don't remember how much it is, but 13,000, say. And for whatever reason, boards decided we don't want to subscribe to the Post-Dispatch. How would we go? How would we make that? How would we do that? I guess the same question applies now. If something costs $7,400, we really don't have a vehicle to say that. Have to.
Would the subscription fall under general category of subscriptions or miss that? Because we already have subscription. So because the statute fall under that regular subscription criteria.
Well, no, I don't think that would fall under curricular resources. I don't think. On the other hand, I don't know why it was $13,000. That might be something to look into. We pay that much to the.
That may have been for posting positions, advertising.
okay,
If you
there you
remember,
go.
we did a purchase over $7,500 for advertising in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. That was a little over 10. It might have been around there. So that could be what, I have no idea since it's not in front of me, but that could be what that's referring to.
That probably is what, yeah, it was 10,500.
Yeah, that's HR.
I think Vice President Cook, to answer your question on some level, the board's expectation is to approve the budget and then approve major proposed expenditures and then make sure that everything else we're doing is in line with policy. And so I don't know that we would generally say it's an expectation of the board to approve every single vendor that we might use. And yes, that is a concern even up to $7,500, but the expectation would be that the decision-making that we're going through internally with checks and balances is that any purchases and vendors we're working with are aligned with the work that we're doing. And if there were concerns there, that the board would surface those and address them as they come up. But an expectation that within the guidelines, we are aligned to the vision and mission as we move forward with operations of the district.
And speaking of the operations of the district, to keep it all in perspective, our operating budget this year, so not counting debt, not counting capital, is in excess of $232 million. And I think that's what you were speaking to earlier.
There's part of me that even wonders, is there some categories that we should be above 25,000? I'm sure there's probably some emergency expenses, HVACs, and things that are pre-approved in the budget that costs just generally are going to be run higher than that. Is there value of writing memos and coming back when we know that's going to be the case ahead of time? I'll throw that out there as well.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it seems like common sense needs to be used here.
Additional discussion board, Ms. McGree, do you have enough kind of guidance?
So my takeaway is that I'm going to take a shot at modifying regulation based on this feedback And I'm assuming I don't know the process beyond that, but I will work on modifying this. I'll run it past Dr. Rompus and other cabinet members to see if we collectively have clarity on what that might be based on this conversation. So the question would be, would that come back to the board during the December meeting, or what would the direction be?
I think in my mind, if you're comfortable at that point, you could bring something back to us at the December
Okay,
meeting.
perfect. That's
Well,
great.
just add some additional commentary or clarity in my thoughts, since we've talked about having those items, depending on the way we move forward, at a minimum coming back as like a payable in the board review. If there's something that's an issue, it could be brought up at the board meeting as commentary. Say, hey, I'd like to have a discussion about this at future time, or any board member could take it up and say, hey, can I set a discussion with yourself or Dr. Rompus around this, just to get better understanding, clarity.
In preparation for the next event.
Yes. All right, then I will move us forward to discussion around purchasing manager. Thoughts on that from the board? If any.
Well, is there any indication as who they would report to and what they would be totally responsible for? And then they're cutting POs, are we double dipping on duties?
I'll speak to the questions you've asked. And actually, I had a conversation about this, and the reason that I recommended it as a purchasing manager is based on our current organizational structure. Within the Department of Finance, there's a director. This position would equally report to that director, as does the accounting manager, the benefits manager, and the payroll manager. And so that would be Mr. Myers as our director of finance. The position would not be producing purchase orders, that type of thing. There are staff in the finance department that already do that. This person would be overseeing the letting of bids, creating requests for proposals or requests for qualifications, working with vendors in terms of vetting them, ensuring that we're working with appropriate people for our organization.
So going along with what Dr. Rompus made comments on earlier regarding responsibilities and making sure that everything's in line with what our curriculum should be geared towards, then that person would be responsible for overseeing who we would be doing business with. All the proposals would be written, gone through that person. Sorry, I should use generic. Through that person. And then they would be responsible for making sure that anything going out for bid was in line with what our goals were for the district.
They would help with leaders of departments in writing specs that would be embedded within boilerplate language that the district would have had legal review and ensure that we're providing the right information.
Who would have final say between those if there was conflict between what somebody in administration wanted versus what somebody in this purchasing position?
I guess I don't understand.
What if there's a conflict between the purchasing manager says, I don't think this is in line with the values of the district, within line, but administration or somebody else within admin is saying, we've always done it this way, or who wins?
What I would say to that is, from a purchasing manager's lens, they are focused on, does the scope have the right specificity without going too specific to force it to be a sole source? So providing a fair and open process for anyone who would qualify to apply. Our administrators would know that they should not bring anything that would be in conflict with our strategies and goals and whatever had been approved and authorized within their budgets. So they would be basically overseeing that part of And that work is typically done collectively through discussions among team members. For instance, in Connie's department, they have group conversations about any particular new project or that type of thing. So that would create the scope, if you will, for a potential new bidding opportunity.
So Ron, as the school district is a governmental body by state statute or local education agency, there's no shortage of state statutes we have learned that apply to how we can bid work. And so it's my understanding this person would be responsible for becoming the expert on that so that each manager within each department isn't expected to know every level of the state statutes for, Connie has to know it to go out for a bid for textbooks or whatever. And similar, the person that does the purchasing of lawnmowers doesn't have to know all of these requirements. And those managers would feed in their specific technical requirements, what they need to this person. This person would bundle it all up, make sure it's compliant with the law, make sure we have the right, they would be the point of contact for bidders, I think. And that person would farm out bid questions to the departments. And I think it's more of an administrative position, not necessarily decision-making that would get into a back and forth about what's right for the district.
That's
Right, fine, is that right?
You're correct.
Well, that's my question is, to you, anybody else that wants to field this, what would this save you? I mean, I want to know. I mean, it seems as if this is one of those positions that takes a hat away from a number of people. And I guess my other question is, how many people in your orbit are doing these things that this person is going to do? What is this going to save you and your team?
I think there's, and sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
and there's endless examples. So whether it's, when we think about cooperative purchasing, so we're buying copy paper at the district level, they would know best what vendors we're utilizing. Is it best to do it through the Ed Plus cooperative? Is it through different cooperatives? Right now, we have curriculum coordinator specialists who, if we're going out for a specific resource, they're the ones talking with the publishing companies and negotiating the contracts. This person will become the expert around that area, or RFPs, RFQs. We've had a couple situations this year where a principal might be working with a PTO and they need a new marquee sign, or they need a new piece of playground equipment, where that's not their area of expertise, but now we're expecting that principal and their administrative assistant to know who to contact to get bids, to do that in the appropriate manner. All of these different areas lead us to potential either policy violations or not getting the best purchasing. We've learned over the last couple of years, as more and more of our purchasing happens through Amazon, that sometimes the easy default is just to go there because it's quick, it's 2-day shipping. Is that really the way to save the most money? And in many cases it is, or there might be other vendors. And so to Adam or Randy's point, that it's administrative in the sense that they're overseeing the process, the department, the work, not necessarily that they are the decision maker for every single purchase that we would make. That would still fall on department managers, principals to ultimately make the recommendation, but understanding that much of this would run through that person as the district expert in this work.
When I asked that question, I saw both of your faces and got it.
Mark, to your question, I think my understanding is that it would take a little bit away from a lot of people.
Right.
Allow them to focus on things that they're experts in.
Well, that was my point, just in county, for example, if this person existed, how many people does she have and herself in her orbit that she can be, having them go and do other things and really focus in on their actual area of expertise versus this that they really don't know a whole lot about, when we can actually hire somebody that knows that this is their job. They're the people that are getting the best deals, that are going to Ken's point, to the right vendors, making sure that we're I can't even imagine how much money we're spending on things that we don't, that there are better deals out there, and these folks just don't have time. They're just like, get it here, I just need this copy paper, I just need this, and we don't really care how much it is, we're almost out, we gotta get it, so that makes sense to me.
And even on common goods, I mean, there can be opportunities. Maybe we don't have the warehouse where we have to have just-in-time delivery, but someone who's overseeing all of the purchases so that they know that, oh, this building needs this, and so does that building and that building, and they can all go together for that bundled bid to get better pricing. So that's the type of opportunities that exist.
All right, I think there's pretty fair consensus around that. If there's nothing else, then I'd like the board to motion.
There was,
Jane?
I take my comment. Due to the importance of the condition of the contracts and pricing, I think that we might govern in the future if we didn't centralize that function. And by that, I mean, as opposed to a manager hiring a director. And the reason to do that is to create a true expert who is expected to know, or this person, he, she, and or the person that might report to them, manager level, that would, instead of having just one person be the expert, we would actually have a director and a manager. And I'm not saying to hire another manager, I'm saying to consolidate some of their activities with the manager over, and then we would have, I guess, the process whereby it would be centralized as far as contracts, it would be centralized as far as investigating and ensuring the correct price and the correct procedure. Those are my thoughts. I don't know if that's clear enough. I don't know that a manager is going to give us what it is that we really need to accomplish what we want to accomplish. My understanding is until now, maybe for whatever reason, processes have gone awry, and you know how creep happens. I mean, it just happens over time. And during that time, we've been possibly defaulting some policies or statutes by the state. My thought is to strengthen that entire process and department and make it one with some teeth behind it, so that we don't get the process again. We hire a manager, and no matter how good that person is, if they aren't at a level where they can influence correct contracts and pricing, I don't see how much is going to change. But at the director level, that all changes. Just some of my thoughts.
So just to boil it down a little bit, there's just concern there about having the right skill set or expertise, and depending on what level that may need to be at.
You're exactly right. The contracts and pricing, I mean, I've seen them make a great companies. So yes, I agree that there would be a higher level of expertise at a director level than there would be there now.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Embry, do you need any more direction around that, thoughts from the board, or are you set?
I think we're fine. We'll still continue the conversation and forward to the recommendations.
All right, thank you very much. Board, if there's nothing else, I'd like a motion to adjourn open session.
Moved.
Sorry.
Carmen, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Ayes have it.